But when God is building what he's building in the visible realm, in the realm of mortals, the way God engages is that he looks beyond a man and he thinks in generations. So if he's going to bless a man, he's not blessing the man necessarily for himself. He blesses the man such that the man is able to build an inheritance such that a generation is preserved. Anointing a man, he doesn't anoint the man necessarily for himself. He anoints the man so that generations can be preserved. If he's going to save a man, he doesn't save a man for himself. He saves a man such that by the salvation of that man, generations will be implicated by that salvation. So God thinks in generations. So every child that is born into the visible realm is born as an answer to a need on the heart of God. Every child. Every child that you see, you that is seated here, there was a need on the heart of God that necessitated your birth. God had seen in the future, he had seen in generations, multiple generations that exceed you, and he knew that you had to appear on the scene at a certain time so that you will be able to bring to pass that which is in his heart. God thinks in generations. And you see, I fear that many of us who are Christians, especially in this season that God is breaking out upon the church, not just in Africa, but in the nations of the world, I fear that the average believer has not begun to live with a burden of responsibility. That what God is doing with me is beyond me. What God is trying to establish in my life is beyond me. If he can get me accurate, if he can get me aligned, if he can get me to a point where my life actually matches what he has in his heart, it's not just me that will be saved. There are generations around the corner that God is trying to implicate by getting you accurate. So the average believer lives without a burden. There is no burden for the existence. He just goes through the motion. So his prayer life is built with the premise that he wants to succeed so that he can fulfill his own portion in the earth. He doesn't see that there is something beyond himself that he needs to live for. This is why many Christians can afford to be careless with their spiritual disciplines. If you understood that your accuracy could either mean the deliverance or the death of a generation, you'll be more serious. If you understood that in getting you, what God had in mind was a mighty harvest, you won't joke with your prayer life. You understood that your purity, your holiness, your being in right standing with God was the building blocks by which God wanted to deliver the whole of Port Harcourt, for instance, you will be more deliberate in your engagements with Jesus. But what we have done most of the time is we have encouraged people to seek God, and the reward for seeking God for the individual is himself. He has not come into the place where he thinks the way God thinks, that if I live right, it might be that a generation will be saved.